Good evening and welcome to NTD News. Here's today's top stories. Governor Cuomo saying almost 3 million New Yorkers have been infected with the virus. That's the result of an antibody test that came out today. Mississippi's Attorney General says he's preparing to sue the Chinese regime over the virus outbreak. He says the people he represents have suffered from the cover-up and they deserve justice. Pressure is mounting in the UK as many urge its leaders to rethink its relationship with the Chinese regime. 2 cats in New York test positive for the coronavirus. It's the first time the virus has been found in pets in the US. And Mexico and the US look to reopen supply chains disrupted by the virus. The Mexican president expects them to operate normally again soon. Thanks for joining us this evening. The U.S. now has over 850,000 confirmed cases of the new coronavirus. Now, Oklahoma and Montana, the latest states to announce they are reopening. But there's debate over how and when to do it. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the details.
Oklahoma and Montana are among the latest to lift stay-at-home orders. Some Oklahoma businesses are restarting tomorrow, while Montana has its sights set on Monday.
Main Street and retail businesses can reopen their doors, but that doesn't mean that things should be just like they were before the virus.
The states are joining at least 5 others in the South, which are already coordinating and plan to lift restrictions by the end of the month. But in some places, controversy is brewing over the decisions. Michigan's stay-at-home order has been extended.
Michiganders will still need to stay home unless they're doing things that are explicitly permitted by the order.
But some residents have expressed frustration and are protesting the shutdown. Likewise, a sheriff in Washington opposes the governor's decision for a longer shutdown. The sheriff wrote a letter calling it a constitutional rights violation and says he won't enforce it. Nearby, California residents are also protesting the stay-at-home order. Like here in Los Angeles, cars honk to express their discomfort with the lockdown. California saw its deadliest day yesterday.
There was some positive news despite those numbers.
He's referring to hospitalizations and number of ICU patients slightly dropping. And in a town near Silicon Valley, officials have started testing all residents for the CCP virus and antibodies. Testing is a top priority for states reopening, as the Trump administration is ramping up contact tracing in hopes of safely reopening the economy. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
New York's governor said yesterday he's working on a joint program with Connecticut and New Jersey to trace people who could have been exposed to the virus. California is working to train thousands of its state workers to do the same there. And Mississippi is the latest state to hold China accountable. Its Attorney General announcing today she's preparing to sue.
Mississippi's Attorney General Lynn Fitch said Mississippians have suffered from China's cover-up of the virus and deserve justice. So she's preparing to sue China for damages. Mississippi is now the second state to publicly seek compensation amidst the pandemic. This after President Trump said he expected more cases when asked about Missouri's lawsuit.
I'm sure that won't be the last one.
Fitch's lawsuit will apparently be similar to Attorney General Eric Schmitt's of Missouri. He's accusing China of suppressing information about the CCP virus and denying how contagious it was, all of which led to death and severe economic problems in his state. Fitch said she'll sue under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. This act will determine whether the state has grounds to sue China.
And Senator Elizabeth Warren's oldest brother died on Tuesday night, 3 weeks after testing positive for the CCP virus. Donald Reed Herring, known as Don Reed, was an Air Force pilot who flew hundreds of combat missions in Vietnam. Herring died at the age of 86 in Oklahoma, the state where Warren was born. Warren wrote on Twitter to thank the medical staff who took care of her brother, but regretted that her family couldn't be there to support him. Early results project that nearly 3 million New Yorkers have already been exposed and infected by the new virus. The news comes as the state ramps up antibody testing for its residents.
New York remains hopeful as the number of daily hospitalizations drops again. The death rate is also on the decline, Around 400 people passed away yesterday. That's down from over 700 per day in recent weeks. Wednesday's report brings the state's overall total close to 20,000 lives lost to the CCP virus. The number of new cases per day isn't going up, but it's not dropping either. Around 1,300 New Yorkers are confirmed to have the virus every day. And the governor says if the state is going to reopen, determining the infection rate is crucial.
And then when you start reopening, you can watch that infection rate to see if it's going up. And if it's going up, slow down on the reopening.
The state's first results came out today. They found that almost 14% of people tested have already developed the immunity or antibodies to fight the CCP virus. The infection rate differs by region. Cuomo says he plans to reopen on a regional basis. And now, New York is enforcing new laws and regulations that protect nursing homes to help safeguard the most vulnerable to the virus.
We're going to undertake an investigation of nursing homes now to make sure they're following the rules.
The rules include temperature checks for staff and mandating that they wear protective equipment. Isolating or transferring patients who test positive for the virus is also required. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And doctors in New York have noticed that many patients with the virus are having strokes. Looking deeper, they've been alarmed to find the patient's blood thins and also clots.
Doctors in New York found something troubling in ICU patients infected with the virus. Many of them were having strokes, and upon treating them, doctors were struck to find blood clots. Dr. Mako said he noticed this as cases started to take off in New York.
I was discussing with the president of the hospital how procoagulant this experience was, and he immediately said, you have to talk with Dr. Poor because he's been noticing the same things in the lung.
His colleague, Dr. Poor, found that blood was not circulating freely through the lungs of his patients on ventilators. That night, a kidney doctor told him that dialysis catheters were often getting blocked with clots. So they started to give patients high doses of blood thinners even before blood clots were detected.
And together we discussed which patients would most likely benefit from this. And most importantly, these drugs are very dangerous. They can cause catastrophic bleeding.
Blood thinners have become a part of the hospital's toolbox, but Dr. Mako said they're still learning about the virus.
And 2 pet cats have been confirmed to have the virus, the CDC making the announcement on Wednesday. It's the first time the virus has been found in domestic animals in the U.S. The cats were from different areas of New York State, and both were taken to the vet because they had mild respiratory illness. The first cat came from a household in which none of the residents had any symptoms. The second cat's owner was later diagnosed with the virus. However, another cat in the same household appeared to show no signs of infection. Both cats are expected to make a full recovery. And in business and economic news, Mexico and the U.S. eye an agreement to reopen their supply chain. India puts restrictions on Chinese investment and more.
Over 4.4 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week. Those receiving unemployment benefits were almost at 16 million the week before that. Total jobless claims for the past 5 weeks reached 26 million, but the pace of layoffs is apparently lessening. 43 states saw less jobless claims. The Mexican president said he expects an agreement that will allow U.S.-Mexico industrial supply chains to begin operating normally again. Operating restrictions on businesses designated non-essential have caused disruptions to supply chains. Mexico has only just entered its highest phase of alert because of growing CCP virus cases. India's plans to screen foreign direct investments from neighboring countries has Chinese firms concerned. They fear it will delay deals in one of Asia's most lucrative investment markets. The tougher rules were not a surprise. Other countries are also on guard against fire sales of corporate assets during the pandemic.
And the German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned her citizens not to relax social distancing measures. She says the virus is far from over.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Thursday that we are not living in the final phase of the pandemic. She said we're still at the beginning and have to act accordingly. Just yesterday, the European country gave a green light to human trials of the potential CCP virus vaccines. The trial is only the 4th in the world of a vaccine targeting the virus. And according to UK's top medical officer, a vaccine is needed in order to ease restrictions on the island country. He said the measures are likely to be needed even after this year ends. Meanwhile, the government is under fire for allegedly failing to fully explain partial death data, for providing only limited testing, and for a lack of equipment for hospitals. And in a Finnish supermarket, doors without door handles were tested earlier this week. The shape of the handle allows the door to be opened with an arm instead of a hand. Its goal is to prevent the spread of microbes through door handles. Norway could see its biggest decline in mortgage demand since the 2008 financial crisis. The decline is caused by the effects of the virus outbreak.
Up next, pressure is mounting in the UK as many urge the country to rethink its relationship with the Chinese regime. Stay tuned for a deep dive into the UK's economic ties to China and more when we return.
Just how does challenging Chinese Communist Party officials on Twitter fit into Brendan Carr's job as a commissioner for the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC? Why is Huawei's 5G a major data security threat? What steps are being taken to boost America-led 5G development? And how are telehealth and telemedicine being rapidly expanded during this coronavirus pandemic? In this episode, we sit down with FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, who previously served as General Counsel of the FCC and Chief Legal Advisor to the Commission. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick.
Welcome back. A missing citizen journalist in China has reappeared in a new video, but many are still questioning if he's really okay. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the details.
Li Zhihua, a Chinese citizen journalist, posted a video on social media on April 22nd. It's his first video since going missing in Wuhan nearly 2 months ago. He went to Wuhan in February to report on what he saw there. On February 26th, he was arrested by police. In his latest video, he described what happened to him since then. He first was chased by a car of unknown people. He posted this live on social media. He was then taken away by police and accused of disrupting public order. He stayed overnight at the police station.
24小时之内，我坐在那张铁凳子之上，和很多位来询问我的警官交流了多次。
The police then told him that he will not be punished. But because he had been in a virus hotspot, he had to be quarantined in Wuhan for 14 days. Once he arrived at the quarantine, his phone and electronic devices were taken away.
期间，一日有3餐，安全有守卫，每天都能看新闻联播。
Li didn't criticize the authorities in the video. One netizen commenting, "This video looks like a hostage reading a manuscript, but as long as you're safe, it's good." Sweden's second largest city, Gothenburg, is canceling its sister city relationship with Shanghai. The two have been tied for 34 years. It comes after Sweden shut down all Confucius institutes in the country, the first European state to do so. There's a new movement growing in Italy of people wanting to sue the Chinese regime for the pandemic. An online petition just launched lets Italians affected by the virus seek compensation from Beijing. The head of the organization behind the movement, One Europe, estimates over 500,000 will sign, and the compensation sought could exceed 100 billion euros. And a popular hotel in the Italian Alps is also suing China for damages. It says China failed to inform the WHO in a timely manner, causing the pandemic to spiral out of control. The hotel was fully booked for the ski season, but suffered devastating losses as all hotels were forced to close on March 12th. This follows lawsuits from India and some U.S. states. British think tank Henry Jackson Society published a 44-page report analyzing the legal basis for suing Beijing over the virus.
The UK is among the hardest hit places in the pandemic. Its Prime Minister, the first head of state to contract the virus. Today we take a deep dive into the UK's economic ties with China and see where things might be headed.
Voices are rising in the UK, urging its government to rethink its ties to China. The calls come over the regime's mishandling of the pandemic.
But there's no doubt we can't have business as usual after this crisis, and we'll have to ask the hard questions about how it came about and how it couldn't have been stopped earlier.
Just 5 years ago, then Prime Minister David Cameron declared the beginning of a golden era for the UK-China relationship.
So this visit marks the start of a new era. Some have called it a golden era in relations between Britain and China.
In 2015, the UK threw a lavish welcome for the Chinese regime's leader, Xi Jinping. Cameron even took Xi out for a pint. By the end of Xi's visit, the two countries signed over $60 billion worth of deals. Under Cameron and then Finance Minister George Osborne, the UK left its door wide open for Chinese money and pushed for closer economic ties.
There is no economy in the West that is as open to Chinese investment as the United Kingdom. You know, we welcome Chinese investment. There is huge amounts of Chinese investment coming into Britain at the moment. Indeed, we're attracting more investment than Germany, France, and Italy put together into the UK.
The flagship UK project funded by Chinese investment was a new nuclear power station at Hinkley Point in southwest England. Chinese state-owned company China General Nuclear Power Group, or CGN, took a one-third stake in the $28 billion plant, which was built by a French group.
We've created a model where we can attract Chinese investment into civil nuclear power.
In return, CGN was allowed to build and operate its own facility at another site. The project was highly controversial. One of the main risks, handing some control over critical British infrastructure to China. When former UK Prime Minister Theresa May took over, the project was put on hold for review, though it was eventually given the green light. But last year, new questions emerged about CGN's involvement when the company was blacklisted by the US Commerce Department for attempting to steal nuclear technology. Chinese investment in the UK covers many areas, from the famous London black cabs to Heathrow Airport, from Barclays Bank to Thames Water. But it's most often focused in the energy sector. Chinese investment peaked in 2017, reaching $20 billion. In comparison, the Netherlands received less than $4 billion, and Germany less than $2 billion in the same year. Aside from investment, trade between Britain and China also doubled within a decade. And with the UK now out of the European Union, Downing Street is free to hammer out a new trade deal with China.
Our ambition is for more trade, not less trade. And China clearly shares this ambition.
Some UK officials have said the country is China's best partner in the West. It was the first Western country to become a founding member of the AIIB, short for Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Launched in 2016, the China-led $50 billion project was designed to provide infrastructure funds in Asia. It's considered a rival to World Bank and the existing Asian Development Bank, a US-backed institution. The UK's move to join angered the US as Washington has raised concerns about the new bank's management and lending standards. US officials saw establishing the new bank as an extension of Beijing's soft power. Contrasting her predecessor's eagerness to join the AIIB, Theresa May was reluctant to endorse another of the Chinese regime's projects, the Belt and Road Initiative. The massive infrastructure project is said to include over 70 countries and cover more than two-thirds of the world's population.
Belt and Road is a cornerstone of the Chinese Communist Party's aggressive foreign policy goals and expansionist goals.
That comment comes from a U.S. Senate hearing about the initiative last year. Critics also say it will trap poor countries in debt. Despite ongoing concerns, current Prime Minister Boris Johnson has expressed great interest in the initiative.
Listen, we are very enthusiastic about the Belt and Road Initiative. We're very interested in what President Xi is doing.
And the most recent example of the UK's deep economic ties to China, the country's decision to open the 5G market to Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Huawei has been operating in the UK for 2 decades, and it's a major supplier to Britain's biggest telecom company, BT. The relationship was investigated in 2012 over potential security concerns. Huawei is now widely reported as having close links to the communist regime.
And there's not only a legal requirement, but there's deep financial investment. You have senior leaders in these companies that are tied to the Chinese Communist Party. We think that it's not about a technical back door. They have the front door.
Despite the U.S.'s repeated warning, Johnson's government decided in January to include Huawei in the rollout of the country's 5G networks, with a market share cap of 35%. Last year, shortly before he was chosen as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson told a Chinese-language TV station that he would be pro-China. But now, anger is rising at the Chinese regime for its handling of the pandemic. Johnson is under increasing pressure to reassess the Chinese regime's position as a trusted partner. And last week, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee warned that those helping Beijing to target British businesses would face scrutiny. This after the UK government stopped a Chinese company's attempt to take over a British chip maker. It's the same group that tried to buy American chip maker Lattice before the deal was stopped by President Trump in 2017.
And coming up, defective personal protective equipment from China continues to flood Europe. Find out how they're sneaking it in after the break.
How do we get to this point? Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
Welcome back. In Europe, a scarcity of personal protective equipment is making some hospitals and businesses turn to imported items from China, sometimes at their own peril. Our France correspondent David Vives has the story.
Made in China.
Agualan Vega says she never knows what'll happen when she opens a box of masks. She works as a nurse in a Paris hospital. As with other hospitals in France, some of the masks come from China.
Sometimes the mask's elastic just breaks at the moment we put them on, or the metal clip doesn't fit the nose.
Defective personal protective equipment, or PPE, imported from China, continues to flood the European market. Spain on Wednesday said it was seeking a full refund for 640,000 virus test kits from Chinese company BioEasy after returning a second faulty batch meant to replace the first. Companies specialized in sourcing masks warn of Chinese companies using questionable business practices to attract buyers from Europe.
Some Chinese companies fake certificates that they use to sell their merchandise to make it look like the items are up to European and American standards when they are not.
NTD contacted VVR International, a company with 20 years' experience sourcing high-standard PPEs in China.
We are currently working on more than 70 cases. I can say only 10% of them meet European and American standards.
But that doesn't seem to discourage some buyers.
Some people rather get poor quality masks than no masks at all. I can understand that. It's a very tense situation.
According to the European Safety Federation, which monitors the quality of imported PPEs, more European companies are turning to mask producers in their own continent. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And now to Germany. In its economic crisis, it's seeking to protect its industry from unwanted takeovers, including from China. Today, its parliament discussed a new bill related just to it. NTD's Germany correspondent Christian Watchen has the story.
On Thursday, Germany's parliament, the Bundestag, discussed a reform to its foreign direct investment rules. The government wants to make it harder for investors outside the European Union to acquire companies active in critical infrastructures and critical technologies.
Marktwirtschaftlich sind,
The fact that we are a market economy does not mean that we can be naive when it comes to risks and threats to our vital national economic health and other interests.
Gesundheitlichen und sonstigen Interessen handelt.
The new rules would mean all investments of 10% or more are pending until clearance is granted, and the threshold for a mandatory government review would be lowered from actual danger to likely detriment to public order or security. German industry associations and some opposition parties criticize the new rules as protectionism.
To seal us off here won't help us in this discussion.
Newly added to mandatory approval are companies active in critical technologies, such as artificial intelligence, robotics, semiconductors, biotechnology, and quantum technology.
Some observers see this as a direct swipe at the CCP. Its Made in China 2025 program seeks global domination in exactly these fields. And some are concerned China could use the current crisis to go on a shopping spree in Europe.
Under the old rules, the German government unsuccessfully tried to stop the takeover of German industrial robot maker KUKA through a Chinese investor 4 years ago. The bill is likely to pass. Reporting by Christian Watchin, NTD News, Berlin.
And still to come, 2 alpacas stroll through the streets of California, bringing smiles to locals. See them in action when we return. Welcome back. 2 alpacas bring locals a smile amid the global pandemic. They took a stroll on the streets of California as part of a plan to cheer up their neighbors.
2 alpacas parade through the streets of Coto de Caza, California, to the amusement of local residents. Video shared on social media shows the alpacas, named Autumn and Willow, taking a stroll around the neighborhood as people stared at the eye-catching pair. One of them apparently decided to take a nap in the middle of the street. The alpaca's owner, Sam, said she decided to take them out in order to bring joy to her community amid the pandemic, and it seems she succeeded. And in Rhode Island, a police therapy dog is bringing people joy another way by sleeping through his own swearing-in ceremony. 3-month-old chocolate Labrador retriever puppy Brody had his own ceremony to become Bristol Police Department's new canine comfort dog, but he snoozed through the whole thing. The event was even live-streamed on the department's Facebook page, but no one seemed to mind the sleepy pup and still thought Brody was adorable. It seems Brody can even bring comfort while he sleeps.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney.